Hello, everyone. Welcome to Forge the Narrative. My name is Paul Murphy. I will be your host today. I'm joined by Red Powell.
What up?
Welcome. Look, it's just going to be us. Everyone is traveling. As we mentioned, Tanya is off. I was going to say in the Great White North, but that's where she lives all the time. And Adam is in parts unknown in Europe, and we'll be back next week. But the Warhammer train keeps on training, keeps on trucking, and there's been some point changes that we're going to talk about this episode. So point changes to some notable armies, and I think we should probably unpack like why this is so meaningful to certain players, and maybe why this even the Warhammer community article alluded to that this is something that's kind of coming out, even though there may be some other factions that are getting their normal quarterly love.
Well, and
Soon.
the Warhammer community was pretty clear. There is definitely something else coming out next month, and so that being said, they have addressed 2-3 specific armies. Now we know that there's more to come because it was previewed already that there's more coming out with the Imperial Knights. But specifically for Chaos Knights and Death Guard right now, that's what they were trying to address. There's a lot of people, and Paul, we've been doing this for a minute. Some people, I can understand where they're coming from. I can empathize why some people may be frustrated in the meta as to the time it's taken to address this. However, I know from the get-go, I've said up front that to a point, I think that the meta still has room to adapt. I think that there's still potential space to grow.
So I guess let's preface this also. We're talking about it specifically from a match play perspective of
Right.
organized play. 2,000 point matches tournaments is what we're talking about, and there's been some seemingly a high win rate for a couple of factions out there, being Death Guard Imperial Knights and Chaos Knights, who have either got new codexes or went through some other changes that may have flipped things in a way that maybe weren't intended. And there's been a lot of discussion online about what they think the balance of those forces has been, and Games Workshop has addressed that in this update this week. Came out a couple of days ago at the time of this recording,
Right.
and I think it's pretty cool that they did it.
I mean, you gotta, like I was saying, for how long we've been doing this, we used to wait years for updates. Years, right? I mean, 2 or 3. Okay, well, I just got my codex. I'm going to now live with this for the next 2 years, and we would ride it. Right? We'd move forward and we'd wait till a whole nother edition, a whole nother codex piece. There was
you
no
played Drukhari. You had one codex for like 12 years straight.
That's right. That's right. And so with that, I mean, okay, so we take all the wargaming boomer talk out of it, and you look at it, and I mean, yes, they've demonstrated it is possible for them to rapidly update things. It is possible for them to move through the war game development piece of it. But there is this whole aspect of how much is out there. What levers do you pull? Is it points change or the rules change, right? So this time we only saw points being addressed. And that's a way to fix stuff. Will it fix it? Does it fix it? I mean, that's these other aspects. When we've seen Death Guard came out around March, and so here we are in August, right? Roughly 5 months later. Chaos Knights were only a couple months. They were in June. And so we're only 2 months off from that, really. And when you look at that, 60 days is a really quick turnaround time to make a massive adjustment, acknowledging that okay, for example, you and me play. You've got your army. You're playing Blood Angels. Let's say I play Chaos Knights in this example, right? And the crazy part about Chaos Knights is that it's not like there was only one new model that came out, but all the stuff was really good. And there was a big change we saw from little knights to big knights. And a lot of people have big knights. I mean, you got big knights, I got big knights, right? And so like all I had to do was
fun to play with.
Yeah, put the little knights on the shelf, put my big knights on the table, and run with it. And that was the biggest change I had to make. And I had good rules. I had effective arguably efficient point costing models. You didn't. Let's just say you kept playing the same 2,000 points. I've got an argument that like it's not my fault as the night player that I brought better stuff and you just kept playing the same thing. You know what I mean?
You bring up a great point, and look, I'd love to play like devil's advocate, and I will to some degree, but I also want to point out that I do agree with you that the meta is a living, breathing organism, and sometimes that going back into the codex or the index in the case gives you different options to bring. But where I'll play the devil's advocate is that this is a build, paint, and play game. What if I
Oh, sure.
don't have the collection that can hang with, that can make that instant flip on into that, or I don't have I can't prioritize building and painting to keep up with that if that's my standard for the
Sure.
tabletop.
No, and
You know,
I think that that's probably the best thing right there as far as the real time that we want to promote, right? We want hobbyists. We want this to be a whole of game approach in regards of building, painting, enjoying your models, and being able to go to it. And so I agree in that aspect as well. As far as like, I do think that it's you this rapid over overproduction of, and it's not the rules or the game itself, but for some of the player base really, of just like, oh well, I'm just going to rapidly throw this thing together because that's what's there in the meta. I'm not really for that chase. I really do appreciate some of the people that I know who are playing the same stuff and rolling with the same stuff, and like, this is what I've had, this is what I wanted to play, this is how I wanted to build into it. I appreciate that.
well, faction specialist is a big deal, but what we typically see how them being continue to be successful is that they are able to, they got a deeper collection with their one
Sure.
faction, and so it's
Yep.
easier for them to
Absolutely.
shift in different units. If a point changes or they have to respond to something, if they need some in this specific instance, if they need to anti-tank things in their army, then they probably already have that unit somehow, built, or at least it's a small change
Sure.
to them anyway. But look, I feel the pain of the folks out there that or either weren't able to adapt, or look at me talking like I'm talking theoretically about every magical index and codex has an answer for everything. Some lists don't necessarily have the best answer for
Right.
everything either. So, also obviously sympathetic to that,
Yeah.
but I do agree that with the way the mission structure is, the modular nature of the game, the fact we roll dice, and I want to put dice into the equation, but the fact we do roll dice, for the generals that are able to look into their codex a little deeper to find solutions, to find the abilities that make work for them, they're going to perform better in most situations. But then we've got a situation of where, well, how much is the game asking the players to, at what rate are they asking them to change? And is that rate higher than maybe what the intent is, or seemingly a faster rate than it is sustainable or desirable or fun? You know,
Yeah.
like
For sure.
I think some amount of fun is trying to crack that nut of trying to um, match my opponent in what they could take a nice take all comers list or whatever,
Sure.
or overcome certain obstacles. But then it's like when that obstacle in round 4 and 5 is always two Death Guard players right in a row or two knights right in a row. Is that a healthy state of the game? I don't know. But what I do know is that we've got some points changes to address some of the feeling of that, and it's going to have some significant impact in what actually gets taken on the table.
For sure. Yeah.
Let's jump into some of those points, if
Okay.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Chaos Knight specifically, since we brought those up. Knight Abominant up 30 points. Knight Desecrator up 30 points. Despoiler up 40 points. Knight Rampager up 30 points. Knight Ruinator to 375 up 25 points. A Knight Tyrant up 15 points, to bringing it to 410. Carnivores. This is the thing. It wasn't just the big knights that are getting a little bit of adjustment. The carnivores went up 10 points to 150 points. Now, I didn't see the abominants taken in quite the frequency that I maybe have expected, but they were in the list. But let's jump over to uh, the Cerastus Knights, the Forge World Knights.
Yeah. The Forge World
Uh,
Knights.
So the big knights, biggest knights, Atropos. Let's talk about the Atropos for a second. Up 40 points to 395 points. The Atropos was one of the knights that was taken in great quantities, and this knight basically had invulnerable saves in combat, had invulnerable saves in sorry, I think it invulnerable saves. It has invulnerable saves, can fight well and shoot well, and was taken typically as many. If you had three, you took three. And I think that this point change is going to reduce the number of Atroposes that make their way into the list because of that extra layer of the missions. You have to be able to play the missions. Therefore, you need stuff on the table. And that's what this point change has done. It's going to reduce your ability, I think, to take more than one, maybe two Atroposes and still have enough to play a 5-turn game of secondary and primary missions.
Fair. I mean, it is, you see some of these things, and I mean, for someone who advocates running like 6 Dorns, for example, being able to run, because you figure 355, right? Or 355 points. At 355 points, I mean, right now, okay, so that limits you to, you can still play them and have plenty of space to play other things. It's not that they're not that big of a deal. Point wise, I can see where some people's frustration comes from when you see, out of 2,000 points, you've got more than enough to pick and choose from all of this. I think, consistently some of the games we're seeing, there's 5 big knights on the table, and I think they can still do that. I don't know if this really changes it so much. So maybe it means
but it's not the same knights.
That's
And
right.
I think that's the thing. And also, you're going to see some phantom 5th knights.
Mm-hmm.
Take a guess at what I mean. What I'm.
Go ahead. I'm interested.
Great unclean ones.
Okay, there you
go. Things like Rodigus also may start to creep back into some lists. Now, by the way, this is not like I think this is great. Find ways to adapt, find ways to still accomplish some of the same things. But ultimately, what you're also going to be doing is going to be replacing some of those models that were harder to interact with models that are easy to interact with for your opponent, giving a more fun experience. Probably, taking games that were tight, draws. Maybe your opponent wins a couple more than they used to. Maybe you got to work a little bit harder to win the same number of games that you were doing before. That's fun.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think this change with the Atropos specifically, and look, the Lancer, which also a popular choice, went up 30 points to 385 points. And the Acheron went up to 30 points to 385 points. So I do think that is the reason that's a big deal is because it changes the composition of what the lists were before. And so you've got less of those knights that are good at everything on the tabletop.
I mean, you're gonna get 5 knights though, right? Like we're not seeing a change in that.
Maybe 4 knights and a grand unclean one. Again, that's something like that. Something along those lines. But still, knights are great. I want knights to be playable. I never want to balance data slate to make an army like not functional or
I think we walk into a paper rock scissors scenario. That's what we want, right? We want there to be more complex. That's quite a generalization, but we want there to be a paper rock scissors aspect to it where, okay, I brought this. This is clearly a response to me versus what I can overrun with my list, that kind of deal. But there's 16, plus factions to choose from to make that happen. And so I think that I agree with you. Like I want knights to be a thing too. I want that to be an aspect of the game. But I think that there's a community of folks out there that don't want them to be 30 or 40% of the field necessarily.
So let's look at just like math facts for a second, and bear with me. It'll be light math. If you were taking 3 Atroposes before, that's 120 points that you've got to
Yep.
find somewhere in your list. And with an army list that is sometimes, like you just hope, you just cross your fingers that everything slots in exactly like you want. I want 4 big knights and 2 little ones, and maybe some um, nurglings or whatever. But trying to find a 120 point list it'll put you down 1, maybe even 2 durable units that you were using to hold objectives before. And the action economy, this is something I want to actually talk more about when I'm actually talking about games, is like what is the maximum action economy that a unit, that an army could do at any given state in the turn.
Sure.
And when you're down a couple of major units and then trying to achieve the same point rate of having to, like in this game you have to do stuff, and you have fewer resources to do it, is that in and of itself a big enough balancing factor even though you've got all the guns in the world?
Sure. Sure. I think, it's funny just from to that very point of like action economy to some of my experience, more recent experience right now playing Kill Team, for example. There is a counteraction mechanic, right? I know you're familiar with, like, if you've got, but Kill Team's back and forth, right? I activate, you activate. And so to an extent, I don't think in 40k you feel that same. You do, because you only have so much on the field to do any given thing, but you do everything at once during your turn, your
Mm-hmm.
activation, right? And so like you at least have a little more room or space when it's your movement phase, your shooting phase, your fight phase kind of deal, versus when you're activating back and forth, because the opponent gets far more votes in Kill Team to like stop or intercede in your activations, because you can see what's activated, what hasn't. But I'll tell you, it has just that back and forth, and then playing something like Raveners, which is currently the only 5 model team in Kill Team, versus someone who has, Trader Guard have 11, or Scouts have 9 models. Like they have the ability to really continue to out interact you. There is a counteract mechanic, but that barely allows you to catch up, and so you really do feel that. And I think, to exactly your point, in 40k you see that with, if you've only got 5 knights, you're only getting so much done. So you've got to make it count. You've got
You
to be
gotta you
very
gotta hope for a strong case for a primary, or maybe that you have a couple of great shooting solutions with 2 knights, and 2 knights get to do something else like
right.
actions.
Right, because in many, like Guard, for example, you've got, or me playing Imperial Agents, I have action monkeys. I have units where their whole purpose is really to go out and play with objectives and do almost nothing else for the most part. And so, but Knights really don't have that. They have to do it all with what they've got on the table.
And I know both Chaos Knights and Imperial Knights, you can fill in some of those holes with like Imperial Agents or Chaos Demons or
Sure.
whatever, but those units are a lot less survivable, and that's kind of what I'm talking about. Like you may be able to put the same number of units in your army or find a way to do it, but those are objectively harder, sorry, easier to interact with units than what you
Sure.
had before, and I think that's going to tip the scales a bit. It's going to feel like there's less pressure in the games playing against the Knights.
Yeah, I agree.
But we'll see. Like this will be the first weekend. I know there are events out there right now this weekend playing with these new points. We just got these points this week, so the wide field test, as it were, is about to occur.
Yeah. I mean, it's big going into several other events that are out there. There's different team events coming up and whatnot. I know we just walked out of WTC, but you know, Nova's here, and Nova happens a week from now,
It
and
does.
so I understand that I believe their 40k event is adopting the points,
Oh,
and
I
so
think every event will. I mean, because like no one wants to be playing with yesterday's 40k.
well, it's I know there's a debate, several debates, different events going on, because
Oh,
you put a rules cutoff, right? If you say, hey, the rules cutoff is this. However, I do think I'm with you. Like you don't want to be playing the old deal. You go into a competition and someone says, well, if you were playing with the new rules, we wouldn't be having this
Look,
problem right now.
I feel that it's always the organizers' call because they're serving
True.
their community and I think whatever is best for their folks. But I think that when you get point changes like this, and now granted, if your event is 3 days later, maybe somebody has some considerations you have to pay attention to. So of course, organizers, you got my vote to do it however y'all want to do it.
Well, and I think most event organizers at this point, there's a healthy community of event organizers out there, that the ones that if you're out there and you got questions, or you're trying to figure out the right way forward, there's a community out there to reach out and talk to people, because there's so many people that it's not our first rodeo having gone through an FAQ arising and all that. And so if you're struggling trying to figure out what to do, by all means ask. But I know that there's a lot of people, like you said, Paul, that they know what to do. They know how to manage their events appropriately.
Yeah, but this change to the Knights, granted, we're seeing, what is it? Basically 10 to, I guess 8 to 10% increases in points
Roughly
on these Knights, and it's significant because it's going to take away one unit that you could probably count on there being in there to round 3, round 4. You're gonna have to change the style up, and it's gonna let some interactivity happen that wasn't there before, maybe, or was harder to do before. And I think that's gonna really make an impact on that win rate, which have an impact on the fun. And I'm not saying wins are always tied to fun, but that interactivity and fun do go hand in hand, and we're going to see that with these changes.
Yeah.
So that's the Knights. Let's take a quick break, get a word from our sponsors, and then we'll come back and we will talk about the Death Guard. Death Guard got some other changes as well. Is it enough? What do you think? What do you think right now? Well, I'll let the listeners decide before we go into the break and come back. Is it enough? See you in a second.
FTN is brought to you by Discount Games Inc. Please visit them at www.discountgamesinc.com. And don't forget to ask Jay about ways to save even more on your hobby projects.
Hey everybody, we are back. Thank you for checking out our sponsors. If you're so inclined, check them out, because pre-orders, there's going to be some stuff that you want. Check out our sponsors. They've been with us for a long time. They believe in the show. They keep the show free for everybody. Please check them out. Jay's a great person to work with. Email him, do all that stuff. So we just talked about the Chaos Knights and how I do feel like that will reduce the number of harder to mess with Knights on the table. And now let's talk about Death Guard. Death Guard didn't have one build. They have several builds.
Several good builds.
Yeah, that were incredibly strong. And let's talk about the point changes. So the Biologus Putrefier went up 15 points to 60 points. That's a pretty significant jump. Here's the ones. Let's talk a little bit about the Death Shroud Terminators. Death Shroud Terminators went up to 160 points for 3 models and 320 points for 6 models. I feel like 160 points for Death Shroud Terminators is still pretty good.
3 models, I think, yeah. For what they do, coming in at 6 inches under certain circumstances, and pretty much cutting up a lot of whatever they go into.
So Death Shroud Terminators, I know we talked about them a bit, but let's talk about them one more time, because of everything they do. They're one of the infantry models that has like a multimodal melee attack, which is pretty good. So they're movement 5, toughness 7, 2+ save with a 4+ invulnerable save, 4 wounds. Ranged weapon, they've got some flamers, which are pretty good. I say flamers. They have torrent weapons, D6 attacks, strength 3, but they're anti-infantry 4+. They ignore cover, and they're pistol and torrent. But the Man Reapers here, 4 attacks with the strike, puts them in strength 8, neg 2 AP, 2 damage apiece, lethal hits. And then the sweep, which is 8 attacks hitting on 3s, strength 4, neg 1 AP, 1 damage, also lethal hits. And then that ability that you talk about, the death approaches in your movement phase when this unit is set up on the battlefield using the destruct ability. It can be set up anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 6 inches horizontally away from all afflicted enemy units and more than 9 inches horizontally away from all other enemy units. So 6 inches away from units, as you just mentioned, makes it easier to charge sometimes. For a unit that is incredibly potent in hand-to-hand combat. So let me tell you why I think that the points, being is what they are, 160 points is still good, and it may not seem like enough, but for the Death Guard player, which I happen to be also a Death Guard player, I love the way they look. In some editions they haven't been this strong.
I mean, they are some of the. I mean, everybody. It's hard to find people that aren't a big fan of scythes, right?
Yeah.
Scythes have a aesthetic appeal, especially when we start talking about 40k and where we're going with it. Scythes are pretty cool, and these guys, and they've got. I mean, they're hulking Terminators. They usually have capes. Everybody likes a good cape, on a villain.
Sometimes they got some Nurglings to go with them, and
they got
Nurglings are awesome.
I'm not the biggest fan of the Nurgle aesthetic, but the scythes and the capes and the Terminator armor are kind of like they do it. It's pretty good.
So I guess the reason why I'm saying I think it's if you're looking at it and saying that is it enough? Asking yourself, is it enough? Know that this still means I get to play Destral Terminators, but I've got less other stuff. Like if I choose to still play Destral Terminators, they're ultimately they're very killable. They've got the really cool rule about being able to come down, but it's conditional.
Yeah.
And so you could play into that or around that. You can interact with that. It's going to be a lot of talk about me interacting with things because I think that's one of the how you judge. Is everybody at the table having a good time? At the game, is it can I deal with this or play into this or play around it or whatever.
Right.
That's one of the things you can absolutely play into or play around. I mean, granted, later in the game it becomes a lot harder, but then we're still talking about like in-game turn 4 and turn 5 maneuvers type things.
Right.
Or turn 3 unit. But that's what you're trying to try to hold them off for 3 turns. But in any case, I have less other stuff. And we'll talk about some of the point changes on the other stuff as well, but less other stuff means the same thing we're talking about with the Knights. My action economy is less. I have fewer units that I can throw away to claim an objective or to trade with you. And so those things that were built in with the Death Guard that are part of their like liability package of having less movement, tougher but fewer models, it begins to start to show itself a little more readily when you have fewer things on the table, which point increases automatically enforce that. Like if you're taking 3 units of 3 Destral Terminators, which is a common thing, 3 units of 3, or maybe 1 unit of 6 and 2 units of 3, but let's just go with the 3 units of 3. That is 80 points out of my list that has to exist. That's 1 less unit of Poxwalkers. I know the bloat drones went up significantly. Like they went up 20 points to 120.
I mean, it's not 30 or 40 like the Knights, but it's still 20 points.
Well, percentage-wise, it's a higher even percentage.
True. Yeah, I mean it's 20%, right?
Yeah. So when you're comparing things that are not equal, percents sometimes give us some perspective.
That's right.
But it's a big jump. So, but know that that point change just on those 3 units of Death Shroud would have equated to me having basically 1 less bloat drone in my army if I wanted to take that. And in the same vein now, let's say I want to take 3 bloat drones. That's 60 points. That's effectively, half a unit of 1 unit of Death Shroud that doesn't exist anymore. Or 1 unit of Poxwalkers doesn't exist anymore. That's 1 less infiltrating unit that can regenerate itself or help me claim objectives. That's 1 less unit trying to compete for the center objective.
Sure.
Foul Blightspawn went up 15 points to 75 points. That's another big jump. The Lord of Contagion, another popular choice. Lord of Contagion was a great popular choice. Went up 10 points to 120. So 120 points for a single model that, I mean, comes back to life. It's a good ability. Still seems like a bargain.
Yeah, I mean, and Lord of Virulence too, right? Like another one to throw in with the Terminators, and
Yeah.
he's up by 10 points. It's still not horrible.
So let's look at it this way: is like when you're taking the Death Shroud, you probably are taking the Lord of Contagion as well. So that's a 30 points increase just on one unit or one package of units. Typhus, we've seen not as often as just the base Lord of Contagion, I don't think, but still a takeable choice. Went up 10 points to 100 points. The Tallyman, that has been in a bunch of lists. The Death Guard are one of those lists that you can kind of decide how you want to tech. Like you may take some base Plague Marines, you may take some stuff, but the special characters, not special, the character models, the leader models, really kind of define what your purpose of that unit is. And Tallyman was definitely being chosen. Tallyman has gone up 10 points to 50 points. Poxwalkers had a 5-point increase to go up to 65 points for a 10-man unit. Here's another big one. The Plague Burst Crawler, up 15 points to 210 points.
Oof.
I mean, that does feel like a lot. Like I feel like the Plague Burst Crawler. I'm not saying it was a fringe choice. You definitely saw players taking them, but they were like the third tier of like the Death Guard top end.
Right. They're on there. I mean, you see them come up, right? And so
Yeah.
15 points, taking them just above the 200 mark to 210.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Malefic Blight Haulers saw a change going from 90 to 100 points to 10 points increase. That, those were also being taken a lot. So when you've got the bloat drones, the Malefic Blight Haulers, and the Plague Burst Crawler, that style of Death Guard list is taking a significant hit cumulative. You're going to lose 1, 2, maybe 3 units if you decided to keep all your quote unquote power pieces in your list. I don't know if you've got any initial thoughts on that.
So, I mean, is it enough? We asked this question. You asked the viewers beforehand, is this going to be enough? And kind of my feelings with the Knights as well. I don't think this is enough to make. It's going to make some changes. They're going to have to adjust how they go. But I think the Death Guard are honestly in a better position with the detachments that they have, like we talked about in a bit ago, right as we started talking about them. They have a lot of good options, and I think this is just they now have better options.
You mean like the detachments? They may be able to like go deeper into just the detachment rules and figure out which is.
That's right. That's right. I think there's just other options for them out of what they already have. I think that they drop. I mean, maybe they drop 150 points or so off their list. Maybe something like that occurs, but I don't think that it's going to stop them. I don't think it's going to change a lot of what makes Death Guard good by dropping a couple things.
Man, again, it kind of goes back to that. Like, so I think maybe what you're highlighting is that point changes are not the only balance lever.
Well, that's what we were talking about, right? I was talking about war game design as a process, and you flip levers and you change things, you adjust things to see if it's going to be enough, and then you determine, do you need to do more? Do you need to adjust more? I mean, again, they've been out for 5 months. How much of the meta changed according to how they played? You've seen some of these lists out there with like the Sisters list with like the 50 plus Meltas, things like that. Like that's an answer. That's a response to Knights and Death Guard in a lot of ways. There's different aspects to that. But is that enough? And are they still pretty efficient? I think so. I think that Death Guard players just off these point changes alone don't have as much to be like. I don't see people jumping on.
Do you think they're going to scrap? They're going to scrap a Plague Marine unit. They're not going to. This is not enough to shake them off.
No.
The Death Shrouds and the bloat drones and everything else.
Not yet. Not yet.
So you think we'll see full complements of 3 of those things still? I mean, look, it didn't have to. I'm not painting you into that as
No. I mean, but maybe but take their normal list and watch them if they drop one. They drop one bloat drone. Like the rest of the list still kicks pretty hard, right?
True. It's true. Yeah, and that's not in that example of if you do drop one blow drone, you're not really losing too much of that whole action economy. Like we play a game where you have to do stuff. When I say do
Sure.
stuff, is that the game has primary missions, it's got secondary missions. I know I'm not. That's not the revelation that I'm trying to talk about. But I just know that a big driver in the game, especially in the later rounds, is asking. What can I do with my depleted resources that are on the table?
Sure.
And if you start with 2 or 3 fewer units, what else has to change about the way you would normally play that game?
Right.
To get you into that, to make that 4th and 5th turn decisions the same that you were making before with the same amount of resources. And I don't know that it's possible with these point changes. And I think that in and of itself, is one of the levers to activate for balance.
Yeah, and I think have you ever seen that video where it's like like the engineer, and it's this girl's watched this video of someone else with like the shapes, trying to put like the shapes in the right hole. Have you
Oh
ever
yeah,
seen that
yeah, I know what
video?
you're talking about.
Yeah, and it's like the person who's putting the shapes in the hole figures out how to put like every shape through one hole just because it works like that, right? And that's like an engineer's that's not what they want because they didn't design it to do just that, but the person doing it figured that's all they need to do. And so I think in some cases it's like that, like that, you see where whether it's the meta or the broader community at large figures out that to just run the mechanics through like one detachment, for example, but then you have this ability to go back and flip a lever, push a button, change something in the mechanics, like points or what have you. And now you're trying to get them to use all these other detachments that are still out there, or different units and things like that. So I think that that's a cool aspect of wargame design. I think that
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of propensity to that. I don't think that it solves. It can do what I just described, but I'm not sure it solves some of the other designer intentions of balancing certain aspects of this army against others, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. Well, look, the proof will be in the pudding this weekend and the weekends to come with
Sure,
Death Guard. But
absolutely.
before we wrap up, I want to talk about Imperial Knights also. Imperial Knights, also saw some changes, and specifically I want to talk about Canis Rex for a minute because Canis Rex is one of those choices that makes their way into a ton of list in allies too, like Canis Rex
True.
being allies here, but going up to 415 points, getting a 35-point increase. I don't know that that's going to change for the list that we're including Canis Rex into that. I don't know that it's going to change things, but it goes back like for the list that we're including it. You definitely are missing at least one extra unit if you choose to include Canis Rex still. I'm talking about for Imperial
Sure.
Knights, Adeptus Sororitas, and Imperial Agents and that kind of stuff.
I mean, he's the king of knights, like he's the guy. Amazing concept. Love the little fluff. Love the dude that jumps out. And I agree. I don't think he's going anywhere. I think he's got a mainstay place for a lot of folks.
In the Imperial Knight list, like the Helverins went up 10 points to 140, and then all the big knights, the Acheron, the Atropos, Cascader, Lancer, Magarian, Strix, all went up in similar points as the Chaos Knights did. So that's definitely going to impact how many of those you see.
That's right.
But also the non-Forge World Knights went up. The Gallant, the Paladin, the Castellan, the Warden, the Valiant, all increases across the board, which what does that equate to? Probably one less big knight on the table, and that might be enough. Especially when a list were already packing stuff. None of the other lists that were answers to these got touched in this particular update.
Right. but we'll see what happens here in the next month. It'll be worth. I'm interested to see what other buttons they push and what other levers that they come along, because it's been an interesting meta, despite what some folks may have seen. That I think that I'd urge some folks to have just patience with the process, because having designed game mechanics and everything, it doesn't always happen as fast as some of us might want.
Too true, but like other lists, such as like I'm going to talk about Gene Stealer cults, Drukhari. I'm even going to mention Drukhari, in this type of thing. But have Tyranids have been able to tech into these high toughness, high mech list, and now with them getting a little bit of potentially, let's see what these points do. But this little bit of change to their makeup may be enough to push those lists through them now with a little bit more regularity. And so round 4 and 5 or 6 and 7 of a match play event might look a little bit different than it did before. Now, I say this even with I have like data, like looking at tournaments every single week, looking at the events, looking at the top 10 of events. There've still been like 7 or 8 factions represented in those top 10 lists. But is this going to change the top spot, or is it going to change that top 10? Like that's, and we'll be bringing that info. That's going to be our show this week. But this is basically just we just got these points. We know some events are happening. Going to be keeping our eye on those and see what has gone on, see if it actually did what they expected to be. My prediction is yes, because of all those reasons outlined. Less units on the table, less things to activate with objectives, less ways to participate on how you score the points, and at the same time having to include things that are easy to interact with your opponent. It's got to change something. Seems like the perfect storm, but we'll see.
I mean, like I said, Paul, paper, rock, scissors, glass, sandpaper,
lizard.
Yeah, lizard. It's out there. The options are out there. They do exist.
Well, thank y'all for listening. Please don't forget to hit that like, share, subscribe. Leave some comments down below. Hit me up on Instagram. Fights with Dice with Instagram. Let me know if there's if you're one of these affected players with the points changes, or if you're looking forward to facing them, or if you did face them and if it was any different. Let us know. We will see you all next week, everybody. Have a great night.
Take care.